Glad to have you along for another Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. If you've been tuned in this week, you'll know we've been addressing several aspects of the corn planting season in Kansas. Some acreage has been sown in the far southern reaches, but the bulk of the crop yet to go into the ground. And we're going to re-examine optimal corn seeding rates right now and factor in the dry weather conditions that prevail yet around Kansas. We've brought back by Ignacio Ciampitti, Crop Production Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Well, Ignacio, optimum seeding rates, there is more than one element that goes into that decision, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, Eric, thanks for the invitation. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at optimal seeding rates, the environment plays a big role. And then there are all the multiple factors anytime that we are working on corn, I mean, as a planting date, row spacing, even rotations, that they might be affecting that decision of what it will be your final seeding rate. But for us, in many situations, one of our key factors is, basically, what is the potential or maximum yield that you can attain in your environment?
And how does one identify that?
Well, when I talk to farmers, I try to go back to thinking about what will happen in your field, in that specific field, in the last 5 years. So you are always thinking, okay, this environment might be around 120 bushels, but it might be worse years. I got 90, 100. I mean, best years I probably pushed to 160. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, I think that it gives us a really good idea of how we start selecting, these seeding rates, because it's a positive effect when you take the right decision. Mm-hmm. But it can be a negative effect if you take a wrong decision. So and why I'm saying that is because if you take the right decision and if you really got into target, if you go to the right seeding rate, you will be able to capture more yields. What will happen if you go to a wrong seeding rate that is not on target? It will probably leave you some yield on the field, and most likely, depending how, if you went to the low side or to the high side, you might be also, economically speaking, you might be even losing money by throwing more seeds when in fact you probably didn't need it, or by buying less seed when in fact you need to push more than environment. Look at your fields and start exploring where are the best yield areas, where are the worst yield zones, and see if those areas are always staying the same consistently across years to try to identify potential approaches to really improve productivity by start working on zones. Okay, and I think that is more comprehensive than in the past. In the past, we were always discussing about seeding rates, and I think that many times we were just focusing on the idea of field level. For this environment, I will just go with 24,000 seeds per acre.
Across the entire field.
Across the entire field, okay? Today we have technology advancement, so we can even start working on variable rate. We can start precisely changing seeding rate in different environments, and even once the zones are identified, I'm always challenging the farmers saying, you don't really need the highest or the latest technology if your zones are clear. If your zones are very clearly established, very well known, you could use your planter and just go to one best area, plant optimal seeding rate, and then go to the worst area and plant a different seeding rate. You
don't have to have the latest cutting-edge technology to optimize your seeding rates on a zonal basis.
No, I think that it's clear in the last, the 4 or 5 years how things are changing and evolving, that even more and more access to data is helping us to start identifying variability. Identify the variability within your field. If you can separate consistently across the years worse versus good areas, and once you start looking at that situation, then I think that the seeding rates will fall into place. At the beginning, we start discussing about how we identify optimal seeding rates. And by experience, if you go back on time and if you think about previous corn situations, we always have some deep dive back. If we have a small part of them in the years that they were not complete, that means that you were almost on target on your seeding rate. So based on your experience, you can go back and start thinking about where are my optimal seeding rates. Whenever you have minimum water deficit, whenever you have good precipitation, you can push population. If you are in an environment, for example, of more than 200 bushels, those are places that you can really push your number of plants, and you will be able to sustain that. What will happen on the opposite scenario is Anytime my water deficit is increasing, the crop is relying on less and less precipitation. What seeding rate does in corn, it really compromises if you are not really targeting the right seeding rate. And the way that it compromise more in a low-yielding environment. Anytime that you have a low-yielding environment and you are over 5,000 seeds or 8,000 seeds, those plants will suffer. I mean, many times those plants potentially will grow very well early season if there is moisture. But the issue is that you are projecting that at some point, those plants during flowering time, when we are defining the kernel number, those plants that relied on precipitation. And if they don't have precipitation, since you are adding more plants, those plants most likely they were consuming most of the water, and they are in a dry, very dry soil condition and highly susceptible to stress. In those scenarios, we want to really see how we can start saving the water and seeing if we can make sure that the crop is facing a much better environment during flowering time and having access to water. So if we are consuming and burning up all the water early in the season, that crop will be depending way too much on precipitation, and it will be most likely to be highly susceptible to stress and failing, to produce any yields. If you look at our recommendations, the most interesting section is a partnership, a collaboration that we have with DuPont Pioneer. We are looking at data from the last 14 years. We try to identify what were the optimal seeding rates by yield environment. And we're trying to identify if those optimal seeding rates by yield environment are changing over time or not. And in many situations, we were coming up with this simple conclusion. Yield response, to plant population when you are in a very low yield environment, less than 100 bushels, is basically we are looking at plant populations that are around 18,000 to 20,000. Always when you are reading this information, you need to realize that we are discussing about plant population, which means that when you are thinking about your seeding rates, you always need to add at least a 5% extra to account for germination and emergence issues.
Because you will never have 100% germination. That's
exactly
the reality of it.
Exactly. In many situations, you might say, I would like to get 18,000 plants, and if you go with 18,000 seeds, most likely you will never finish with 18,000 plants. So we always are saying, okay, maybe if I want to get 18,000 seeds, I might go maybe with 19,000 seeds to get 18,000 plants. Moving to a different yield environment, so what we call the medium yield environment, is between 100 and 150 bushels. You see that slowly you start seeing a small response to population. Still, it's not as clear. So, and then in those situations, we say, you might be able to push seeding rates. Don't go too far. And many of our studies are showing between 22 or 24,000 on the seeding rates, and then final plants around similar numbers. And then we see clearly responses to population when we start moving to more than 150 bushels. So we call the high-yielding environments going from 150 to 180 bushels. Usually around 30 or 32,000 plants is basically agronomically maximizing yields. And when we are moving to environments what we call very high-yielding, we start seeing that we need a little bit more plants. Those are environments more than 200 bushels and above that really we can push population.
There's still this need for some assumption here, though, Ignacio, in that we don't know if this dry spell is going to turn into a normal moisture pattern for this corn growing season. And therefore, does one, at planting time, lean toward the option of paring back some on the normal seeding rates then?
Yeah, and you need to realize if we are going into a very dry season, things can change very quickly. As we know, we are in Kansas. But even when you're looking at optimal seeding rates, final number of plants, you have enough space to play on the conservative side. And I think that if you are going into very dry soil condition, we might need to be careful or not to go too high. And also we might need to be careful not to go too low, that we might get penalized if the conditions improve later in the growing season, because the water requirement for small plants right now is very small, and really, truly, the high peak of water demand for corn is defined in the first week of July until the end of July, all around the flowering time. So we are still in a good shape. We just need to make sure that when we are planting, make sure that you plant in good conditions, place your seed in contact with moisture, so we can try to get all those plans coming up uniformly and timely. I mean, we usually like to see everything between 7 to 10 days out. Having an excellent early season stand is as critical as basically to make sure that we have high yield potential for corn.
So don't make drastic changes here at seeding time.
Exactly.
You've referenced it already, the article that's posted in the e-update series on March the 23rd, so look for that edition on optimal corn seeding rate recommendations, and all the numbers that Ignacio shared are fully depicted in that article. It's at agronomy.ksu.edu. We appreciate the word, Ignacio. Thanks for coming over, as always.
Thanks, Eric, as always, for the invitation.
That's Ignacio Ciampitti. He's a crop production specialist, K-State Research and Extension, and we'll return shortly with more here on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
You're listening to Agriculture Today. On this segment, we want to inform you of a service and some information from that service out of the Agricultural Economics Department here at Kansas State University and its Office of Local Government. The information that office generates is of very great value to our local leadership in our counties around Kansas. And what we're going to talk about here, really two things. A recently posted summary of fiscal conditions and trends in Kansas counties over 10 years' time, as well as the annual county report on those very trends that will be out very soon now. Over from the Office of Local Government here at K-State is the Extension Assistant with that office, Rebecca Bishop. Rebecca, welcome to you. And if you would, as we look at this summary of fiscal conditions and trends, what is the purpose of putting together what amounts to a rather massive report when it's all said and done?
Thank you for having me. The purpose of the report is just to give county officials an idea of what conditions and trends looks like in Kansas. This summary was for all Kansas counties. It gave the Kansas County average for a variety of topics, as well as which county had the highest per capita expenditures and the lowest, and things like that, just as simply an information tool.
And we're looking at official expenditures by the counties?
Correct. Yeah. We utilize budget documents that each county submits to the Division of Accounts and Reports in Topeka. We use the actual numbers in the budget. When a county does a budget, there's 3 sets of numbers. The first column, they have their actual expenditures. The next column is their current year, what they anticipate spending. And then the next column, the third column, is the budget for the following year. Mm-hmm. So by the time we get the budgets and get ready to start looking at the data, it seems like there's a 2-year lag, but that's because we want those actual numbers and we want to report on what really was spent and what really did come in as revenue instead of kind of guessing.
And by doing so, you can come up with, as the title of the document implies, trends in both expenditures, revenues, and everything that drives a county budget.
Exactly.
And this canvasses the period 2005 to 2015 in this particular document then.
Correct.
Let's take up, say, trends in county expenditures, Rebecca. This breaks out into, 4 main categories, you say?
We do have, there's 4 main categories. There's general, road and bridge, law enforcement, and then other. Mm-hmm. Other encompasses things like conservation, health, extension, mental health, things like that. So all of those lumped together obviously are larger than our other 3, general, road and bridge, and law enforcement. Of those 3, we often see general expenditures, what keeps the lights on, running administration, the office staff, county commissioners, clerk, all kinds of things like that fall into general. And that obviously is somewhat larger than road and bridge or law enforcement.
Do we see trends in how those expenditures are moving over that 10-year period? Are they going up? Are they going down? And this is on a statewide basis now.
On a statewide basis, we have seen some stability in those areas. Obviously, amongst counties, it varies greatly, but overall, when we look at this specific report, 2005, 18% of all expenditures were general. That was the same in 2015. Other expenditures, the conservation, all those, 55% of total expenditures. That was the same in 2005 and 15. Road and bridge and law enforcement flexed a little bit, but only within a percentage point or so.
So there's stability there.
Yes.
Interesting. When we look at revenues, one of the main sources of revenue for counties in Kansas, as we know, and of great interest to agricultural producers out there, property taxes. They're still the driver by and large?
They are. 2005, 44% of total revenues for Kansas counties was property tax. In 2015, that was 46%. So property tax is still a major component of the revenues in a county.
From 44 to 46, did you say?
Correct.
So modest growth in that particular area.
Heavier reliance, I guess, on property tax than on some of your other categories.
And those would be such things as sales tax.
Sales tax, demand transfers. Really, demand transfers have kind of been whittled down to the special highway gas tax that each county receives, and then your other, which would be user fees and other various taxes.
The demand transfers would refer to revenues that would be distributed by the state.
Correct. Yes, there used to be LEVTR, city-county revenue sharing, but both of those have been phased out, and so they're left with special highway gas tax coming back from the state.
And you said property taxes grew very modestly over that 10-year period. Does that also suggest that the other categories were relatively steady as well?
There seems to be a heavier reliance on some of the other taxes, like user fees and whatnot. In 2005, other taxes and fees accounted for 29% of total revenues, and in 2015, they accounted for 33%, so about a 4% increase on these other taxes and fees.
So this report is broad across the entire state of Kansas. This gives a 30,000-foot view of the state and how revenues function. So as leaders locally would look at it, this would suggest statewide trends that maybe they can compare their own counties to. Would that be the usefulness of this?
They could, and then I would point them to their individual reports that we issue every year that deals specifically with their county, and it would give them a better picture of some of the circumstances that maybe are occurring just with their county that other counties might not face.
And let's talk about those individual county reports, which are going to be made fully public here quite soon. They basically depict the areas of information that we find in this overall 10-year report.
Correct. It covers an 8-year period, but it does so for each county and just their numbers. A few places we give the Kansas County average, but for the most part, it just covers each individual county.
And there's an opportunity to use that information to make fiscal decisions locally and study the trends and, moreover, benchmark compared to other years and see where the trends are tending in their counties.
Exactly. And there are a variety of circumstances that can impact those numbers, and that's something that each county would understand themselves. If they had a major expenditure one year because of a natural disaster, then they could see, well, that's caused this to increase or whatnot. So they have to look at it and keep in mind some of the special circumstances that may have an impact and play a part in those numbers.
And not just expenditures, revenue sources as well, because decisions need to be made on, for instance, property tax levies and so forth.
Correct.
So how might leaders access either of these, this 10-year summary of trends or the individual county reports?
The 10-year summary report is currently posted on our website at www.ksu-olg.info. The newest report that was just sent out last Friday should either be reaching the county commissioners and clerk any day now, or if the extension directors have elected to receive the commissioners and clerk's reports, then they should be getting them any day now, too, and then they'll present them to the commissioners.
But the public has access at some point to these as well if they'd like to have a direct view of it.
I will have them, the 2018 reports, posted probably by Friday on our website as well. Currently, there is the 2017 reports online, so if someone wants to look at the 2015 data that the summary report covers, it's what's currently posted.
For each of the 105 counties with one exception.
With one exception, Wyandotte County, which is a unified government with Kansas City, and so they're not included.
Very good. And once again, we'll repeat that web address in just a moment. But so much effort, Rebecca, goes into collecting this information. It's certainly worthwhile for county leaders to make full use of what's out there. And it does give a hint of trends and baseline for decision making.
We think so, and we're always happy to schedule appointments with individual commissions and discuss the report with them, show them how we got the numbers and things like that. We're also happy to answer any questions that anyone has over the reports.
Excellent. The contact information for you and your colleague, John Leatherman, others on the staff, is at the website as well, which we'll share in just a moment once more. Great work in pulling all of this together, and thank you for giving us a brief taste of what the reports have to say, Rebecca.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
She's Rebecca Bishop, and she's from the Office of Local Government, Department of Agricultural Economics, Kansas State University, an extension assistant in that office. To find out more about these reports and see the numbers directly, go to their website, which is www.ksu-olg, for Office of Local Government, .info. Looking for the summary of fiscal conditions and trends for Kansas counties 2005 to 2015, or if you're interested in your specific county, those county-by-county reports will be there online as well. And we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today after a few moments away. This is the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. We're back now on Agriculture Today. Coming your way next to this week's K-State Horticulture segment. And for you homeowners, it's time to ramp up your weed control strategies for your cool season lawns as the growing season gets rolling here, and concentrating this week on crabgrass issues and how to deal with those. Joining us once more, turfgrass horticulturist, K-State Research and Extension, Jared Hoyle, a notorious weed, crabgrass, as it gets loose in our cool season lawns. And it's important to jump on this as soon as possible, Jared, right?
That is correct. So crabgrass is a summer annual weed, and there are some other summer annual weeds that typically infest lawns like goosegrass and foxtails. But crabgrass tends to be the one that's most abundant, and if we can target crabgrass with our pre-emerge herbicide programs, then we're able to take care of some of those other summer annual weeds too. You may have some escapes here and there, but if we can time it for crabgrass prevention, then we'll end up doing better in the long run throughout the summer.
So any time now as the weather provides?
Yes, right now, crabgrass typically germinates around May 1st or a little later, depending on the year or depending where you're located. April 15th is kind of our calendar date we look at to trying to get that crabgrass preventer down. It could go shift a week earlier, a week later, but as we're approaching that, so really any time right now, you can go ahead and get it out.
Is that modified in any way because of our cool temperatures of late, though?
Yes, with the cool temperatures, we've seen some, nights that have gotten down pretty low, below freezing. And I typically think about it as, well, if there has been crabgrass germinating, which it's too early for it, but if some has, those cool temperatures will just go ahead and kill that young crabgrass seedlings that are there because it can't tolerate it. So I have no doubt that if you get something out right now, you'll be perfectly fine between now and April 15th. And there's some options if you didn't get it out by April 15th that you can go back and kind of clean up with and then have it for the rest of the year.
Well, let's presume that one can get out there, say, this coming weekend or shortly thereafter, and treat their lawns against crabgrass. What are the product options of choice here?
There are a couple different products out there. Most of the products are going to last about 60 days, and that has to do with how long it breaks down in the soil, what kind of rainfall and everything we have, and that's like pendimethalin or a product called Team, and there's some other products, Surfland. But there are two products that last significantly longer or that give you a more longer term that homeowners can use. It's called Barricade and Dimension. Those two can actually go out earlier if need be. Those will give you season-long control. Some of the other products that are out there, you might have to do split applications where you come out April 15th and then come out 4 to 6 weeks later to another application to get you through the rest of the summer.
And how do these generally work? Are their modes of action similar, or?
They all have similar modes of action, but what they do in common is you apply these products and they actually don't kill the weed seed itself. These products sit on the soil surface. That's why it's important to make sure you read the label, because it will require it to be watered in with a certain amount of water. If you don't have irrigation, then you want to try to hopefully time it with the rainfall within a certain period of time. What happens is when you apply these, it's a barrier on your soil, and so you have just a little bit of that herbicide sticking to that soil surface. And then when the weed seeds germinate, you have the shoot and the root come out, and what they do is they run into that barrier, and they soak up that herbicide that's sitting right there on that soil, and then it kills that tiny seedling that's there. So it actually doesn't kill the seeds itself, it kills the ones that do germinate. This is why it's really important to make sure that you maintain a healthy lawn, because the healthier your lawn is, the least probability you're going to have of having germination of those weed seeds anyways. So you're putting less pressure on those pre-emerge herbicides to do the job.
So if one is accomplished in maintaining that healthy lawn, having the longer residual product may or may not be all that necessary, right?
That is correct. So it's kind of what is available out there, what is your price range, at what stores that you typically go to or wherever you go to buy these products at. Personally, for my lawn, I do some of the shorter-lived ones and just do 2 applications because they're typically cheaper. But if it was later in the season, say I didn't get out and get my pre-emerge herbicide out, there is a product that I mentioned earlier, Dimension, that kind of breaks the mold. It has some early post activity. So say you forgot about it, vacation or something going on, got busy, and you weren't able, and you get out there and you see a little bit of crabgrass starting to germinate, you can apply Dimension, and it will kill that crabgrass that's in the 1 or 2 leaf, maybe up to the 3 leaf stage, and then it will have the residual for the remainder of the season.
What about applying this preventer with your fertilizer program? This may be a situation, you say, where weeding and feeding may not be the option of choice, correct?
That's correct. So we typically recommend the crabgrass preventers be applied before fertilizer gets put out. So if we think about it right now, and for, say, cool season lawns like tall fescue, we're getting close to April 15th. That calendar date, or when the forsythia is blooming and the red buds are blooming as well, that's a good indicator it's time. The turf is not really ready to go and growing. It is greening up. So if we apply the pre-emerge on a fertilizer, then we're fertilizing a little too early. We might promote too much shoot growth and not enough root growth. I know we talked a little bit about that last time. So if you can just put the preventer down, and then you won't be stimulating that lawn. Now, there are some products out there that do come on fertilizers, and if you end up choosing to do one of those applications, make sure you're using a slow-release fertilizer on your cool season lawn, and try and make sure that analysis is as low as possible, that the numbers are as small as possible, and you're applying that for the herbicide and not for the nitrogen that's in there.
Whatever one does, one needs to get after it fairly soon, reining in their crabgrass before it takes off.
That is correct. And I do want to mention, that's for cool season lawns. Mm-hmm. For warm season lawns, we still would like to put a preventer down as well, because the crabgrass, it doesn't matter if it's in fescue.
It doesn't care, does it?
It does not care. So with that one, you definitely want to make sure that you do not apply that on a fertilizer because we are still dormant with our warm season grasses, and you can wait till it is well out of dormancy and actively growing before you fertilize the warm season grasses like Bermuda or zoysia and buffalo.
Well, it's one of the more common weed problems we see in lawns, cool and warm season varieties year after year, crabgrass. Preventing it is the best cure for this problem, and that means getting a treatment out there very soon. Jared, we appreciate the update, and we'll have you back soon to get into more aspects of lawn management. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
That's Jared Hoyle, turfgrass horticulturist with K-State Research and Extension. And that is this week's K-State Horticulture segment, closing out our Thursday edition. Thanks to you for being along with us. Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.